me to draw you back to something you said in the middle of this latter part of your wonderful statement. You mentioned this wonderfully provocative designation that you have for yourself, a born-again pagan. Moving now to our second movement as we are in our conversation, would you, first of all, explain to us what that is and how you imagine that as a moment that speaks against the problem, or a moment speaks toward the problem of disenchantment and meaninglessness. And I would ask you to do the same, Tim, with your Christian identity.
You want me to start?
Yeah, why don't you start? Why don't you start?
Okay. After my youthful phase of Weberian despair, I was for some years an Aristotelian pagan. I thought that I could make sense of my life and of the world with resources that I was able to put together out of the philosophy of Aristotle. That didn't do the trick for me. There's just too much in Aristotle that I don't believe, and too many things that I do believe that can't be found there. And one of them, maybe the most important, is my my bone-deep belief in the infinite value of the individual. Yeah. And this is missing in Aristotle. And you can't, even on the most generous reading, you can't read it into him. So that's not going to work. So I asked myself, well, where does this idea, the infinite preciousness of the individual, come from? That's a biblical idea. Invention, discovery, however you wish to characterize it. It's central to all of the biblical religions. Yeah. And so I asked myself, is it possible to take a little from menu A and put it together with a little bit from menu B? Can I have my Aristotelian paganism and supplement it with some biblical individualism? And I was scratching my head about that when I rediscovered Spinoza, and then a whole family of thinkers like Spinoza, before and after, who, on my reading of them, attempted to do exactly that, to, you might say, Christianize or Hebraize the philosophy of pagan antiquity, to reinterpret it, reread it, reappropriate it through the lens of the biblical invention or discovery of the value of the individual. And what better name for this reborn paganism, this enriched and revivified paganism, than a born-again paganism, which has passed through has received a baptismal charge by being passed through the long middle period that separates the ancient world, which was one of massive enchantment, from the modern world of disenchantment, to which I think born-again paganism gives us a way and some hope as an alternative to either just outright, let's call it secular despair on the one hand, or a program of belief and commitment that some, at least, feel that they're not able to accept or to subscribe to.
Well, let me give you the headline, then go back and try to make my case. I would actually say that the inherent dignity of every individual, every human being, makes a great deal of sense in a universe in which God is a personal God. He's also a person. Luc Ferry, the French philosopher, wrote a book a couple years ago called A Brief History of Thought. Like I said, it's those of us who like to popularize scholarship rather than are scholars. We love books like that. Here's a scholar who's boiling it all down, and he's an atheist, but he said, honestly, he doesn't think the idea that every single human being has inherent dignity and equal dignity would have arisen in other worldviews other than the idea that you have a personal God. In fact, I'll say how personal in a second, who creates people in his image and has a love relationship with him. That's all personal. And Kyle Harper, who's a classics professor out at University of Oklahoma, recently I read an article, a very new article about him, looking at whether the Romans, the Greeks, the Stoics, Aristotle, Plato, whether you could get the idea of inherent equal dignity for all human beings out of any of that, and the answer is no. It made more sense in a universe with a personal God rather than an impersonal God or an impersonal force. And I'll go, so in a sense, I feel that what Spinoza was doing, and actually what Tony's doing, though my esteem of this and affection for this man, though it's only about 2 hours old.
We all had dinner together.
Yeah, we had dinner together. Makes me loath to be too critical here, but I'm just saying, it feels like what you did was you had a universe in which a particular value, there's a guy named Larry Siedentop recently wrote a book called Inventing the Individual, and he shows that comes out, that idea of the importance of the individual made sense in a universe in which there was a personal God. And so it almost seems like you want to say, I don't believe in a universe like that, but I still want to have the value. And I would say, okay, I'm really glad you have that value, brother. I really am. And I hope that, we can do an awful lot of great stuff together in a city or in a town. Still, it feels to me there's an inconsistency there. The only thing else to say about the personal thing is, Augustine loved to point out that the Christian God is tri-personal, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And he made this interesting case. He said, if you had a unipersonal God, so what I like about Christianity is God's not just personal, but really personal. If you have a personal God, then love would have come in later. Because if you have a personal God, that God would have the power to create other beings, angels, humans, whatever. And love is a relationship between persons that would not have happened until the creation. So if it's true you had a unipersonal God, there wouldn't be love till the creation, which means in that God, power is more basic than love. It comes first. But if you have, from all eternity, beginningless eternity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit knowing and loving each other, that means that, and why would a God like that create other beings? The Jonathan Edwards answer and the Augustine answer is in order to share the love that they had. So that love comes before power, not power before love. So love is more basic. And on top of that, it's a little bit like this God doesn't create people so that he can get, I'm going to use the word he here, worship, because he already had love. In other words, he didn't need to create people to adore. He already had that inside. They were all adoring and loving each other. In John 17, Jesus is saying, I had glory with you before the Father. You glorified me, I glorify you. So there's a sense in which this God would unselfishly be creating. Love would be more basic than power. The idea of the individual dignity makes sense in that universe. That all seems to fit together for me, and that's one of the things that animates my understanding of the universe. Though on the ground, I actually have the same basic commitment how I would treat people as Tony, out of a somewhat different view of things.